If you'd told me a year ago that I'd fall for my best friend's older brother, I would have laughed in your face. That guy? No way. He was loud, cocky, always shirtless for no reason, and had that stupid smirk like he knew every thought in your head before you said it. And the worst part? He kind of did. His name was Brandon, and he was supposed to be just a friend. I first met him back when I was still in high school, and he was already in college. He'd show up to our place to pick up his little brother, Matt, my best friend since we were kids, and linger in the kitchen long enough to flirt with every girl who'd ever stepped foot in our house. I was the quiet one, the observer. He barely noticed me back then. Fast forward a few years, Matt and I are in our second year of college, renting an apartment off campus. Brandon had moved back to town for work, and after a breakup and some kind of falling out with his roommate, he needed a place to crash for a few weeks. Matt offered him our couch. "We've got space," Matt said casually, tossing chips into his mouth like it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't thrilled. Brandon was chaos, and I liked my space quiet. Predictable. But it's not like I could say no. The first night Brandon moved in, he strolled in with a single duffel bag, a six-pack of beer, and that same damn smirk. "Miss me," he said, clapping me on the back like we were old pals. "I barely noticed you were gone." I shot back. He just laughed. What I didn't expect was how easy it was to fall into a rhythm with him. He wasn't the same guy the first remembered from high school. Sure, he still had that arrogance, still walked around the apartment like he owned it, still left the bathroom mirror fogged up from his unnecessarily long showers. But there was something else now. Something quieter, softer. I started noticing things, like how he always made a second cup of coffee, even though he never asked if I wanted one, or how he'd throw a blanket over me if I fell asleep on the couch during one of our late-night movie marathons, or how his teasing started feeling less like jokes and more like questions. One night, Matt was out at his girlfriend's. It was just me and Brandon on the couch, watching some mindless comedy neither of us were really paying attention to. His knee brushed mine. I didn't move. He didn't either. The knee thing should have meant nothing. Just a casual accident, right? That's what I told myself. But my body had other ideas. The moment his leg touched mine, something happened, like a switch flipped somewhere deep under the surface. I didn't move. Neither did he. We both just sat there, watching some dumb movie while our legs pressed together like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. I tried not to look at him. Tried to act like I was still into the movie, like I hadn't suddenly become hyper-aware of every inch of skin that was touching his. My heart was beating faster than it had any right to. I felt like a high schooler with a stupid crush again. And that was dangerous. Because it was Brandon. I finally shifted, pretending to stretch, creating just enough space between us to breathe again. But the electricity still clung to my skin like humidity in the air after a thunderstorm. Brandon didn't say anything. He just glanced at me, only for a second, and then turned back to the screen. "Movie sucks," he said casually, breaking the tension like it was nothing. I exhaled a laugh, grateful for the out. "Yeah, pretty bad." "You want to switch it?" he asked. "Nah, I kind of want to see how much worse it gets." Brandon smirked again, that signature half smile that looked like he was always 3 seconds away from saying something inappropriate. But he didn't. Instead, he got up and grabbed another beer from the fridge. "You want one?" he called. "Sure." He tossed me the can, and I caught it, barely. We cracked them open at the same time. That felt like the end of whatever had just happened. Like we were going to pretend it didn't happen. Like maybe we both needed it to not be real. But it was real. And it wasn't just the knee. The next few days, I noticed more. Things I couldn't unnotice. Like the way Brandon started staying up later. Usually, he was out cold by midnight, sprawled on the couch, snoring like a chainsaw. But now, he lingered. Waited until Matt went to bed. Sat with me through movie marathons he used to groan about. And then there were the small touches. A hand on my back when he leaned past me. an arm draped casually along the back of the couch that sometimes, just sometimes, let his fingers brush the back of my neck. None of it was obvious. None of it could be called out. But I felt it. I felt it when I walked into the kitchen and caught him shirtless, sweat damp on his chest from his morning run. He didn't bother covering up. Just stood there, talking like it was normal, like I wasn't staring. I felt it when I came home from class and found him sitting at the counter, scrolling through my sketchbook, even though I'd never shown it to anyone. He just looked up and said, "You're crazy good at this, man," like it was the most natural thing in the world. I should have been pissed. But I wasn't. I wanted more. The shift between us didn't come in a single moment. It was slow. Quiet, like erosion. Like a steady drip that wears down stone until it finally cracks. One night, after a long day of classes, I walked in to find the apartment empty. Matt was out again. His girlfriend had started practically living at her sorority house, which meant Brandon and I were alone more often than not. The living room lights were off, but I could hear music from the back. Soft, low, Brandon's playlist. I dropped my bag by the door and followed the sound to Matt's room. The door was cracked, and Brandon was inside. He was sitting on Matt's bed, elbows on his knees, head down like he was deep in thought. I don't know why I didn't announce myself. I just stood there, watching him, something heavy settling in my chest. He looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like he was carrying something he didn't know how to put down. He glanced up, caught me watching, and didn't even flinch. "You ever feel like you're just stuck?" he asked, voice low. I blinked. "What do you mean?" Brandon shrugged, eyes not leaving mine. "Like your life's happening around you, and you're just kind of there, watching." That wasn't what I expected. Not from him. Not from the guy who always had a joke, who always brushed off everything with a laugh. I stepped into the room without thinking. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know what that feels like." He nodded once, then looked away. The silence sat between us for a beat too long. Then he said, "Sorry. Didn't mean to get all weird. Just rough day." "It's fine," I replied. "I've had a lot of those lately." He glanced at me again, and something shifted in his face. Like maybe he saw something there he hadn't noticed before. "Matt's not home?" he asked. "Probably won't be tonight." Brandon nodded slowly, then stood up. "You want to eat?" I was going to order something. "Yeah, sounds good." That night, we ate takeout on the couch and didn't turn on the TV. Just music and dim kitchen lights spilling into the living room. Somewhere between the empty boxes and the third beer, Brandon leaned back against the couch, turned to me, and said, "You're not what I expected." I raised an eyebrow. "What'd you expect?" He shrugged. "I don't know, just not this." "This?" He looked at me, really looked. "You're easy to talk to." That shouldn't have meant anything. But the way he said it, low, almost like he didn't mean to say it aloud, made my chest tighten. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The look between us said everything. And it didn't go away when we said goodnight. It lingered, like a door cracked open, waiting for one of us to push through. The next day was normal. At least, it looked normal on the surface. Matt was around more, hovering in that way best friends do when they sense something's going on but can't quite name it. We played video games, ordered pizza, passed time. Brandon barely said anything the whole day, just sat on the couch with his phone, scrolling without really looking. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. My room was dark except for the glow of my charger light in the corner, but my mind was too loud to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing his face. The way he looked at me, like there was something he wanted to say but couldn't, or wouldn't. At some point past 1 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen to get water. I didn't expect anyone else to be awake, but Brandon was there. Sitting on the counter barefoot, legs dangling, hoodie pulled over his head, beer in hand. "Can't sleep?" he asked, voice quiet in the dim light. I shook my head and grabbed a glass. "Too much going on up here," I said, tapping my temple. He chuckled under his breath. Yeah, same. I leaned against the counter across from him, sipping slowly, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Not with him. You always like this? I asked finally. Like what? Thinking too much when it's quiet. He didn't answer right away, just stared down into his drink like it had the answer. Then, not always. Just lately. There was something in the way he said it. A tightness, like he was weighing every word. You want to talk about it? I asked. He looked at me, really looked. And I knew before he even opened his mouth that whatever he was about to say would change something between us. There's something you don't know, he said slowly. I didn't move. Okay. I didn't just leave my old apartment because of my roommate. I waited. I left because of what happened between us, I blinked. Like, you two fought? Brandon gave a tired smile. Yeah, you could say that. There was a long pause. He didn't fill it. He just let the words hang there until I had to ask. Was it bad? Brandon looked up at me. We crossed the line. That knocked the air out of me for a second. You and your roommate? I asked, trying to sound casual and not like my heart had just spiked to 100 beats a minute. He nodded once. It was a mistake. At least, that's what I told myself. We were drunk. It was messy. And then it wasn't just once. Wow, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. I haven't told anyone, he added. You just told me. He gave a soft laugh. Yeah, I guess I did. The room felt heavier somehow. Like the silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was full of new things. Possibilities. Why'd you tell me? I asked. He looked at me. Expression unreadable. Because, he said, I think I needed you to know. I swallowed hard. My glass felt too full, too heavy in my hands. I set it down carefully. And now that I know, I said quietly. Brandon hopped off the counter, stepped closer. His voice was lower now, steadier. I'm not expecting anything. I've been sleeping 10 feet from you for weeks now. Watching you walk around in those damn sweatpants. Acting like you don't know what you're doing to me. I felt my stomach drop. You're not exactly subtle either, he added, almost teasing. I laughed. More from nerves than humor. So now what? Brandon leaned in, close enough for me to feel the heat off his skin. I don't know, he murmured. But if you don't want this, you should probably walk away right now. I didn't move. He waited. Still, I didn't move, and that was all the answer he needed. His hand came up slowly, fingers brushing against my jaw, and then he kissed me. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was quiet. Like we both knew this was happening, whether we were ready or not. He pulled back, just a little. Just enough to search my face. You good? He asked. I nodded, barely able to speak. Yeah, I whispered. I'm good. He kissed me again, and this time I kissed him back. The next morning didn't feel like a dream. That was the strange part. I'd half expected to wake up with my brain trying to convince me I'd imagined it, that the kiss, the heat of his body pressed to mine in the kitchen, the quiet confession, none of it had actually happened. But it had. I knew it from the second I walked into the kitchen and saw him standing there shirtless, pouring cereal like it was any other day. Except it wasn't. Brandon looked up when he heard me come in. His eyes met mine for half a second. Just enough for something to flicker between us, an acknowledgement. That, yeah, last night happened. And no, we weren't going to pretend it didn't. But we also weren't going to talk about it. Not here. Not now. Morning, he said, voice casual. Hey, I replied, grabbing a glass of orange juice like I wasn't running the entire thing through my head again on loop. Matt walked in right after, yawning, hair sticking up like he'd slept in a wind tunnel. God, I need coffee. That broke whatever invisible wire had stretched between me and Brandon. We both shifted, leaned into the routine like nothing had changed, but everything had. All day, it was like trying to live a double life. Matt and I went out for groceries, talked about homework, picked up more ramen than any two people should legally be allowed to eat. Brandon stayed behind, claiming he needed to get work done, but I knew he was giving us space. Or maybe giving himself time to think. When we got back, the apartment was dark. Brandon's door was closed. Matt headed to his room without a word, earbuds already in. I stood in the hallway, staring at that closed door. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. I knocked lightly. "It's me." A pause. Then, "Come in." I opened the door to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, hair still damp from a shower. The smell of his body wash, something clean and woodsy, hung in the air. He didn't look at me right away. "Is this gonna be a thing?" he asked finally. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I mean, is this just something that happened once? Or are we doing this?" I didn't answer right away, because I hadn't let myself think that far ahead. But the way he looked at me, tired, hopeful, scared to hope too much, made something settle in my chest. "I don't want it to be just a thing," I said. His head lifted, eyes finally meeting mine. "Me neither." I sat down next to him, close but not touching. It felt like we were building something here. Slowly, carefully. "Matt can't know," Brandon said after a beat. "Not yet," I agreed. "Not until we figure this out." There was another pause. "You scare the shit out of me," he admitted. I turned to him. "Why?" "Because I actually like you." It was the most honest thing he'd said so far. No smirk, no joke, just the raw edge of something real. "You think I don't feel the same?" I asked. "I don't know," he said, voice low. "I've never done this, not like this." "You mean being with someone?" "No, being real about it." I nodded, understanding in a way I hadn't expected to. Because I hadn't done this either. Not like this. Not with someone who made it feel less like a risk, and more like finally breathing. Brandon turned toward me, and this time, when he leaned in, I met him halfway. The kiss was slower now, like we had time. Like this wasn't just a moment. We were building something out of it. He pulled back slightly, hand still resting on my leg. "You staying?" he asked quietly. "Do you want me to?" He nodded. So I did. That night, I slept in Brandon's bed for the first time. We didn't do anything but talk. Quiet, half-whispered words in the dark. He told me about college, his ex, the confusion he'd carried for years, shoved down under football games and beer and pretending to be the guy everyone thought he was. I told him about the guys I'd almost dated, but never quite did, about being scared of wanting something real, of someone actually seeing me. Brandon did see me, and I was starting to see him too. When I finally drifted off, his arm was around my waist, his breath slow and steady against the back of my neck. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. But in the back of my mind, one thought kept whispering through the quiet. What happens when Matt finds out? We lasted exactly 6 days before everything started to crack. For those 6 days, it was like living in a secret bubble. Brandon and I figured out a quiet rhythm. Late nights, low voices, the occasional brush of hands when Matt wasn't looking. I'd wake up early just to sneak out of his room before anyone noticed. Sometimes I'd lie on his chest until the sun started bleeding through the blinds, pretending we had all the time in the world. We didn't. It wasn't sustainable, and we both knew it. But we weren't ready to talk about that part yet. Brandon was softer when it was just the two of us. His voice lost the cocky edge. His touch got gentler. And the way he looked at me when I wasn't paying attention made my stomach flip in a way I wasn't used to. He wasn't just a closeness. He wasn't even a question anymore. He was something I wanted, which made everything harder. Matt didn't suspect anything. Not really. But he started to notice something. The way Brandon lingered in rooms I was in. The way we'd stop talking too fast when he walked in. It wasn't obvious, but Matt wasn't stupid. Then came the night that almost ended everything. It was a Thursday. Brandon had gone out with a couple coworkers after work, and Matt and I were watching a game on the couch. Just another normal night, until Matt muted the TV and turned to me with this look, half confused, half suspicious. "Can I ask you something?" Sure. "Is there something going on between you and my brother?" My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked too quickly. Matt raised an eyebrow. "Don't do that. Don't play dumb." I tried to laugh it off. "Dude, where is this even coming from?" "I don't know," he said. "Just, I see the way you two are. It's different lately." I didn't know what to say. Every part of me screamed lie, but something in his voice made it impossible. "Have you asked him that?" I asked carefully. Matt shook his head. "I don't need to. I'm asking you." I stared at the muted screen, trying to slow the rush of panic flooding my chest. Matt was my best friend. He was also Brandon's brother. This wasn't just about us anymore. It never had been. "Nothing's happening," I said finally, and I hated how it sounded coming out of my mouth. Matt studied me, then gave a small nod like he didn't quite believe me but didn't want to push. That night, when Brandon got home, I pulled him into my room and shut the door behind us. "We need to talk," I said. He knew instantly. "He asked you, didn't he?" I nodded. "What'd you say?" "That nothing's happening." Brandon looked down, jaw tight. "Great." I didn't know what else to say, Brandon. "I know," he said quietly. "You did the right thing." But it didn't sound like he believed it. We stood there for a long minute, the weight of everything pressing between us. "We can't keep doing this," I said. He didn't move. "We're sneaking around, lying, avoiding. This isn't sustainable. It's not fair to Matt, and it's not fair to us either." Brandon finally looked at me. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we either tell him or we stop." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Brandon swallowed hard, then sat down on the edge of my bed, elbows on his knees, just like that night when it all started. "You think he'll hate us?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I think it's better than him finding out on his own." He was silent for a long time. Then he looked up, and his voice cracked just slightly when he said, "I don't want to stop." I sat down beside him, close but not touching. "Neither do I." "So we tell him?" I nodded. And just like that, the decision was made. We were going to tell Matt. The next night. We didn't eat dinner that night. None of us had the appetite. Brandon paced the living room for almost half an hour, wearing out a trail in the rug. I kept sitting and standing, trying to act calm, but my chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Matt was supposed to get home around 8. At 8:12, the front door opened. "Yo," Matt called out as he stepped inside, dropping his backpack on the floor. "Why does it feel like somebody died in here?" Brandon stopped pacing. I stood up. Matt looked between us, his expression shifting from casual to confused in under a second. "Okay, what's going on?" I glanced at Brandon. He looked back at me. And then he stepped forward. "We need to talk to you," he said. Matt's brow furrowed. "What? Why do you sound like you're about to confess to a murder?" Brandon let out a breath like he was trying to steady himself. "Just sit down, okay?" Matt didn't move right away, but eventually he walked over and sank into the armchair. "You're freaking me out," Brandon sat across from him. I took the spot next to him on the couch, close enough to show we weren't hiding anymore. "Not from this. It's about me, and—" Brandon started, then paused. "Me and him." Matt looked between us again. His eyes narrowed, and then, like a light switch, his whole face changed. "You're kidding," he said flatly. I opened my mouth, but Brandon beat me to it. "No," he said. "We're not." Matt stood up. You've got to be fucking kidding me. It's not. No, don't. Matt snapped, cutting me off. How long? Brandon's jaw tightened. Couple weeks. Couple, Matt laughed, bitter and sharp. So what? You just what? Dated and decided to keep it from me? It's not like that, I said, trying to stay calm. It's more than that. Matt turned to me, eyes narrowed. You're my best friend. I know. And you didn't think maybe this would be a big deal? I was scared, Matt. We both were. We didn't want to mess anything up. Well, congratulations, he said, grabbing his bag off the floor. You did anyway. Matt? No, he said sharply. I need space. He walked out. Just like that. The door slammed behind him. The silence left behind was deafening. Brandon didn't say anything. Just sat there, staring at the floor, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists. I sat next to him, not touching him, not saying anything. There wasn't anything to say yet. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. Finally, Brandon whispered, "He's never going to talk to me again." "He will. You didn't see his face." I reached for his hand. He let me take it, fingers cold and tense. "He's angry," I said. "He has a right to be. But he's your brother, Brandon. And he's my friend. This isn't the end." Brandon nodded, but he didn't look convinced. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. I went back to my room, and for the first time in weeks, the silence felt lonely again. I stared at the ceiling for hours, trying not to imagine the worst. Trying to believe that what we had was strong enough to survive this. But in the dark, all I could think was, what if it's not? 3 days. That's how long it had been since Matt walked out and stopped speaking to both of us. He wasn't ghosting entirely. He was still coming home late at night, still crashing in his room, still making coffee in the mornings. But it was different now. Everything was quieter, colder. He didn't sit with us, didn't say more than one-word answers, didn't look at us unless he had to. The apartment felt like it had cracked down the middle, and we were all tiptoeing along the edge. Brandon tried once, tried to pull Matt aside and talk to him. I watched it happen from the kitchen. The second Brandon said, "Can we talk?" Matt just shook his head and walked out the front door. He didn't come back until after midnight. That night, Brandon dropped down onto the couch, rubbed his face hard with both hands, and just said, "I fucked this all up." "You didn't," I told him, even though part of me didn't know if that was true. I wanted to believe that Matt was just hurt, that this was just a bruise and not a break, but I didn't know. Brandon and I tried to keep things distant. No late-night cuddles, no touches in the hallway, nothing that would make things worse. It hurt. A lot. To go from this raw, open thing to acting like we were strangers again. And the worst part? Neither of us knew what came next. On the 4th night, I came home to find the apartment empty. No Matt, no Brandon, just a note on the counter. Needed some space. Be back later. I sat in the kitchen for almost an hour, just listening to the fridge hum. I didn't even hear the front door open. Matt stood in the doorway, keys in hand, staring at me like he wasn't sure why he came back. I stood slowly. "Hey." He didn't move. "I know you don't want to talk," I said, "and I won't push you, but I need you to hear this." He exhaled through his nose, tossed the keys on the table. "I didn't plan this," I said. "I didn't fall for him because he's your brother. I fell for him because I couldn't not. Because the version of him I've gotten to see these last few weeks, he's different, Matt. He's real." Matt didn't say anything. "I know this sucks," I continued, "and I know we should have told you sooner, but we were scared. Of this, of exactly what's been happening." Finally, he looked at me. "You lied to me." "I know." "You could have told me from the start?" I nodded. "We should have." He sat down heavily at the table, rubbing his hands over his face. "I didn't even think you liked guys." "Brandon or me?" He gave a dry laugh. "Either." "I didn't think he did either," I said, until he kissed me in the kitchen. That earned the first real look from Matt in days. "You serious?" "Dead serious." Matt leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So what you guys are like, a thing now. We're figuring it out. There was a long pause. I just needed time, Matt said finally. It wasn't even about you two chillin'. It was the lying, the sneaking around. I felt like the last person in the room to know what the hell was going on. I nodded. That's fair. He looked down, jaw tense. He's still my brother, man. And you're still my best friend. I didn't want to lose either of you. He was quiet for a second, then said, Then don't. And that, just that, was the first crack of light after days of silence. The next morning, things were still a little tense, but different, lighter. Matt didn't avoid us. He didn't exactly join us either, but when Brandon asked if he wanted coffee, he actually said yes. That alone felt like a win. Later that night, I found Brandon in my room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, messing with the charger cable he always borrowed but never returned. Hey, I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up. He talked to you? I nodded. Yeah, we're okay. Brandon gave this slow, exhausted sigh, like he'd been holding his breath for days and was finally letting it out. I thought we lost him, he said. We didn't. He leaned his head back against the dresser, eyes closed. I hated how it felt. Pretending. Not being able to touch you. Not knowing if we'd ever go back to this. I crossed the room and sat next to him, close enough that our knees brushed. This, I echoed, softly. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just sat there in the quiet. Then Brandon shifted and reached out, fingers brushing mine. I want to do this for real, he said. Not in secret, not halfway. I want to be able to say you're mine, and not have to look over my shoulder every time I feel like holding your hand. I looked at him, and for once, there was no hesitation in his voice. No guarded jokes. Just him. You already are, I said. Mine. The kiss was slow, not rushed or desperate like the first one. It felt earned. It felt like something solid, something real. We didn't sleep with each other that night. Not because we didn't want to, but because some part of us understood that this meant more than that. This wasn't about lust anymore. It was about showing up, choosing each other. The next few weeks felt like a reset. Matt gave us space, but not the cold kind. He asked questions. Sometimes he teased, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he just listened. Slowly, the weirdness faded. The awkward silences dissolved into normal ones. Comfortable ones. I told my mom about Brandon. She didn't flinch. Brandon told his. She cried, then hugged him harder than she ever had. We went public in the quietest way possible, me posting a picture of us at the park, his arm draped over my shoulders, both of us smiling. No caption, just enough. The texts rolled in. Some shocked, some supportive, some curious, but none of it mattered more than the way he looked at me every morning. The way he leaned down and kissed me on the cheek when I was still half asleep. The way his hand found mine in crowds. The way, when no one was watching, and even when they were, he held me like he'd never have to let go again. And maybe that's what love really is. Not fireworks. Not perfect timing, but staying when it's hard. Choosing each other even when everything's messy and complicated. Holding on. And building something real.